We will be traded under the symbol PHOS, PHOS. That's on the Canadian Securities Exchange. I believe that should happen within the next 1 to 2 weeks. This is our flagship area. This is where we have the 43101 established. What we've also done at the same time is we've locked up all these other lands in this area here. Bégin-la-Marche is where we've found these exceptional surface samples. Basically, we're going to be doing an extended drilling campaign right in this area here this spring, just to see if what we found on surface confirms into what depth. Where do we see first phosphate working? Well, we see first phosphate working starting right from here. We truly do believe that in order to have a properly functioning just-in-time auto manufacturing industry in North America or Europe or anywhere else, the auto manufacturers are going to need full control over their supply chain, right?
Oof. Yeah, that sounds really interesting. So buckle up and enjoy this long ass but also hella informative video. Real quickly, I actually got in touch with John from First Phosphate thanks to my friend Arne over at the Battery Commodity Twitter account. Also, quick note, I actually got no financial compensation from either Arne or First Phosphate for this video. The only revenue I will be earning on this video will come through YouTube. Links to both Arne's Twitter and First Phosphate socials can be found down below in the description. Now, with that said, welcome John to the YouTube channel. It is a true pleasure to have you on here and to be able to pick your brain on some of these really complex topics, which we'll start doing shortly from now. So thank you for coming here.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Stein. Appreciate the invite.
Yeah, excellent. So as a general outline for both you, John, and the viewers, I would love to ask you a couple of questions first regarding phosphate as a material. So why the material matters, why we need so freaking much of it headed into the future, the supply and demand side, those kind of things. After, I would like to focus in on the First Phosphate story. So where the company currently stands, what its short to medium term plans are, a potential public listing following soon, those kind of things. And lastly, I would like to ask a couple of questions regarding you, John, because I believe your story to be quite interesting as well. If that is all right with you.
Absolutely, Stein. Go for it.
Okay, perfect. So without going too deep into the backstory just yet, could you perhaps shortly explain who you are, what First Phosphate is, and introduce what your role at the company is?
Sure. So my name is John Passalacqua. I'm the CEO of First Phosphate Corp. First Phosphate Corp is going to be an integrated miner of phosphate material and producer of LFP cathode active material for the lithium iron phosphate battery industry.
Okay, perfect. And your role at the company?
I am the CEO.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for the short introduction. And that's a great bridge into my next question, because I'm going to ask you, what is phosphate used for? I Googled this answer, and I Googled this question, and I got this answer. Fertilizer and feed are the major outlets for phosphates. Industrial phosphates are used in a broad range of end uses, including food, detergents, personal hygiene, and construction. But that is, like you stated, not the main one that you're focusing on, correct?
Yeah, it's correct. So, I mean, you have to be careful on the internet. There's a lot of information on phosphate. There's a lot of misinformation. It's a very complex topic, and for that reason, it's really hard to decipher, and it's hard to get it in bite sizes on the internet. So I'll give you just a little bit of a really, really top level on phosphate. So traditionally phosphate, about 90% of phosphate is used in the fertilizer industry across the world. It's used as a base material that gets mixed with, nitrogen, ammonium, potash to create, different forms of fertilizers. And there's, hundreds of types of fertilizers that can be created. So that will always remain the traditional use and need for fertilizer. That's 90% of the world's need of phosphate, and I believe it will continue to be that way. Now, within the 10% of fertilizer, sort of the 10% category of what is called purified uses for phosphate, that's purified phosphoric acid, you will find such uses as, beverages, like you'll find it in a can of Coca-Cola. You'll find it in industrial paints. You'll find it in cosmetics. You'll find it in pharmaceuticals, fire extinguishers. It's used as an etching agent in electronics, and now it's being used for the lithium iron phosphate battery. So that 8 to 10% of phosphate use requires a really high purity of phosphoric acid, which basically that means that when you have fertilizer, you're basically taking phosphate out of the ground and you're doing one quick purification, and then it's good for fertilizer uses and for animal feeds. But to go up to that 10% category, where it gets into human and industrial consumption, you're getting into purified phosphoric acid. So you're going into much more higher purification. And so within that 10% component, where it's really going to be a massive demand driver in there, is going to be the lithium iron phosphate battery. Nobody seems to have the statistics yet, but we believe that the need for purified phosphoric acid in the Western world can potentially go up by 50%. It could double. It could even triple. Based on this need for the lithium iron phosphate battery, because as you know, the lithium iron phosphate battery is not just for electric vehicles, but it's it's a complement and a substitute to the other lithium ion batteries, so it can work in large scale energy storage, and that's where the lithium iron phosphate battery is excellent because of its cost and its safety features. But it can also be used in small electronics. And it can be used in larger vehicles such as buses, trucks, and such. And it's got a big use in there. So the real big usage of or expansion of phosphate is going to be within purified phosphoric acid for the creation of lithium iron phosphate batteries, which is a high purity usage. I hope that explains it, because it is terribly complex, and if you go out on the internet, you easily get lost. I know I did in the beginning as well.
That is actually a really good explanation. So your company, like you said, First Phosphate, is focusing on the top 10% purity pure phosphoric acid for those LFP battery demand. Okay. And I would love to dive a bit deeper into those LFP batteries, because I think it's a really interesting technology to talk about. Because especially Tesla at this moment in time is using LFP batteries in about 50% of their vehicles produced during 2022. There needs to be a reason for that. So I want to ask you, what are the main pros and cons of using LFP batteries, especially compared to the more traditional lithium-ion batteries?
Yeah, so I'll give you my perspective of it. Everyone's got a different perspective, and there's a lot of complementarity. There's controversy. I'll try and give you the most neutral perspective on it that I can. So there are the lithium iron phosphate batteries, and within that category, it's been traditionally a nickel, manganese, cobalt, or a couple of the other chemistries as well in there. And they were really predominantly the main batteries. And lithium iron phosphate battery was very small, and it was only produced in China. But then the production of lithium iron phosphate battery really started to eclipse in China. It started to become 40, 50, maybe even 60% of what they use there. And many feel that trend is coming to North America and to Europe, and they see it coming. Unfortunately, right now, 90 to 99% of lithium iron phosphate battery is still produced in China. So any of that's coming to North America is coming through direct importation. But there are some large initiatives in North America, to some extent in Europe as well, to bring a local lithium iron phosphate battery supply chain to the rest of the Western world. Now, people are very well invested in nickel, manganese, cobalt, and sometimes people say, well, it's because of that we don't talk as much about lithium iron phosphate battery. I don't believe that, and I don't believe that nickel, manganese, cobalt, and lithium iron phosphate battery are competitive to each other. I believe that they're complementary. I believe that lithium iron phosphate batteries got certain advantages, and nickel, manganese, cobalt has other advantages. And if you look at the predictions by 2030, 2040, it looks like it will be an even split, 50-50, between the NMC chemistries and the LFP. And even the LFP is going through a little bit of augmentation, in that they're now creating in China LFMP, so lithium manganese iron phosphate, and that gives it a little bit more power to get it up to that category of the NMC. So now, just to step back a bit, the nickel, manganese, cobalt batteries, they're very good, better for range, and they're better for more stringent uses. The lithium iron phosphate battery is really good for local distances. It probably doesn't have the same power, about 20 to 30% less than the NMC batteries. They are working on that, and what's good is as the technology all across the board on these batteries improves every day, that gap has become less and less noticeable. And that's one of the reasons why LFP is starting to take off, because now they have a range that's very comfortable for city driving, for what is 80% of what's out there, going to school, picking up the kids, going to do groceries. Like, you don't really need, such long distances. And also, the charging stations and the whole charging infrastructure has improved. But the main advantages of LFP are, it's low cost. It's about 33 to 50% less in terms of its cathode active material to the NMC. It has a much higher, better fire rating. These batteries do not catch fire. And that's really important for a manufacturer, because you think, what's the worst thing that they want is, a headline with a battery blowing up on it, right? So that's really important. The other really important thing is it's an easier source of materials, right? Yes, there's going to be a pinch on phosphoric acid, and yes, the lithium is hard to source, and even the iron sulfate that goes into it is hard to source, but it's easier to source. There isn't supply issues around it, and it can be sourced in larger quantities. So for instance, when you're making the much larger batteries for the buses, and also for the large-scale storage applications, like if you're storing energy coming off of wind or solar farms, there just isn't that much metal in the world to do all of that. So with lithium iron phosphate, you get you get to those really big applications. So LFP is winning on all of those factors. It's winning on safety, reliability, cost, source of materials, traceable supply chain, ethical sourcing. But I don't believe that it's going to replace NMC. I believe that there's a market for both of them, and I believe we should be friendly to both of them, and we should be invested in both technologies, really. I hope that answers the question. I know it was a bit of a long answer.
No, that was actually a really good answer, and you, I'm surprised with all the benefits that LFP batteries do have. I wasn't actually aware of the fire hazard being less so than compared to lithium-ion batteries, so that's really eye-opening. But I'm surprised that you didn't name significantly more life cycles for LFP batteries, because when I was researching for this interview, I found that LFP batteries often have significantly more life cycles before the battery breaks down. The number I found online is 3,000 compared to, for example, 500 to 1,000 on a classic lithium-ion battery. So is that number close to correct?
Yeah, that is a very important point, and to some extent I did miss that. But I also want to be very neutral, because you start to get into controversy, because obviously different manufacturers have different ratings. A very good NMC battery might have a longer life than an LFP. But yes, in general, it seems that the life of the LFP battery has a much longer duration, and it's probably because of the simplicity of the elements in it. But again, it's hard to say too, because everyone's making these claims, but these batteries are brand new. Like, we haven't seen a battery out there for 10-15 years yet, right? Maybe they're starting to see some of that in China, and in fact, they're already starting to deal with recycling and the rest of that. But in the Western world, I mean, we don't have these. They've been maybe in the Tesla for 1 year, so it's hard to really say what is what until you have the actual empirical evidence. But they do feel that yes, they will have a much longer life and than the traditional NMC batteries. And that's important also because, you have to understand, in the 1950s, when the whole automobile industry took off in, North America and Europe, and that was the start of, the big industrial, the big post-war industrial economic recovery, it was all built on, the family sedan. It was all built on, that middle-class car, those middle-class uses of refrigerators, televisions, but mostly the automobile. So, what really kicked that off was, the ability to have safety, right? The ability to have put a warranty on something, the ability to have that sort of, that middle class wagon. And that's really what the LFP battery is, right? It's not meant to be the most high performance battery out there, but it's meant to be that one that gives you the best fire rating. You could put your kids in, you're safe, you could take your kids to work, to school, you could go to work, you can do your groceries, and the manufacturers, this is really important, will be able to put a warranty on there, right? Or some claims of safety and some claims of reliability and warranty, where they're on the hook for it at the end of the day. So that's why I think it's getting all the attention right now, and they're really seeing it as it's the battery of mass adoption, I believe.
Okay, that is a really nuanced answer, John. Thank you for that. Really insightful as well. Now, do you think that having LFP battery supply chains and technologies as a car manufacturer, electric vehicle car manufacturer, is an inherent competitive advantage that investors should be looking for? Do you think is it truly a driver of future returns for electric vehicle producer? How do you look at this?
So if I understand the question correctly, I think you have to go back and you have to kind of look at, what is a fossil fuel car and what is an electric car. So, a fossil fuel car has a lot of componentry, and it has it's all engine, right? And the battery is just like a little component in the corner, right? We all know how those work. We all have one, or we've all had one. But when you move to an electric vehicle, it's basically all battery, right? The battery is the engine, and it is everything, and you don't have all the other componentry that runs the gas and the oil and everything else. So it's a very important component, right? It's almost the main component of the vehicle. People have asked me before, well, what is the cost of the battery with respect to the rest of the vehicle? It's hard to know, but some would say is anywhere from 25 to 50% of the cost of the vehicle, depending on the vehicle, is that battery. So that battery is very important to the automobile manufacturers. And I'll point out one other really important thing at this point. I think we've all heard of just-in-time manufacturing. Just-in-time manufacturing was invented, I believe, in the 80s and the 90s in Japan, and it was all about not holding too many inventories and having really good suppliers and everything showing up at the right time so that you could assemble the vehicle properly. The same is going to apply for these EVs, right? Whether it's Tesla, that was not a traditional auto manufacturer, or GM or Ford or anybody else that's doing it, or anybody in Europe, they're still going to have just-in-time manufacturing processes. So the just-in-time is really going to be all in that battery, right? Sure, it's still going to be a little bit in the car doors and the steering wheel and the accelerator and all that, but a lot of that just-in-time is really the battery, right? So the battery is a very important component of the automotive manufacturing system, similar to what the engine used to be for the fossil fuel car. So expect a lot of real scrutiny and a really lot of attention on the battery components, and and we see this, right, with the automobile manufacturers going in and purchasing the mines now, because they realize that in order to get a proper battery with a proper material with a proper life cycle, you need to have control over the process, right? Because anybody can mine, lithium, phosphate, or manganese, cobalt, or any of these other materials, but the real devil is in being able to process these and have a proper homologation process, such that that there's going to be a consistency in the materials that go into that battery, so that you can run these just-in-time systems and you can have a constant and secure output all the time.
Wow, that is truly insightful, John. I thank you for that. I also really agree with that view that batteries should require a lot of attention from both EV manufacturers and investors, because it's such a central piece of an EV, of an electric vehicle. So yeah, I totally agree with that. Now, I would love to ask you for a ballpark figure regarding how much phosphate is required for the typical car battery, just to paint a picture for how much phosphate demand we're looking at. So if you could give a rough ballpark figure for how much phosphate is used in the typical LFP battery in the typical car, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I'll try to do my best. We're still working on some numbers, and you appreciate, again, different cars have different batteries, have different requirements. And so, I'll share my screen in a second, but what I'd like to do first is I'd like to just give you a little bit of an explanation of how the battery making process works. So first of all, you have in the LFP battery, you have input materials, right? You have lithium, you have iron, and you have phosphate, and that's very generalized, right? And these elements have to come together to create LFP cathode active material. So it's basically a brown type of material, brownish black kind of material, and then that goes into the cathode of the battery. And then there's the anode component of the battery. Then they have to wrap it up. It goes into cells. Those cells go into packs, and then the packs go into batteries. The batteries go into the car. So when we talk about the battery, it's a pretty complex animal. So I'm going to talk to you just about the element that is in the cathode. Okay, so I'll just share my screen here a little bit. Okay, so here we are. So basically, these are the inputs in creating LFP cathode active material. Like I said, it's the powder that goes into the cathode, which goes into the battery. So this component here, the blue component, is a purified phosphoric acid. Okay. Mm-hmm. So basically, of your inputs, of your inputs, 28% of the inputs would be purified phosphoric acid. The other input here is our friend lithium, 10%, and that comes in the form of lithium hydroxide, not carbonate, lithium hydroxide. And again, with the purified phosphoric acid, that's after various purifications. This is not phosphate out of the ground. This is, substantially purified, phosphate. That it's, it's 99%, 99.999% purity. And then here you have iron sulfates. Iron sulfate is, basically the iron that goes into it, but it's in a form where it's together with sulfur. And then what you do is, you put these three elements together, and there's two processes of doing this, which I can explain later. But basically, these processes, once they're complete, you have, LiFePO4, which is, lithium iron phosphate cathode active material. And the chemical weight of that is, 61% PO4. So what happened here in the H3PO4, the H3 has gone away. And also whatever water was in the solution has gone away. So you're left with 61% PO4. Then you're left with 35% iron. So the sulfur has gone away, and the lithium, it's lost its hydrogen, oxygen, water type molecules, and this is what you're left with, right? So that's the composition of the battery, which is very different from what the input materials are. Okay. I don't know if you have any questions on that before I proceed, or?
No, to me it's perfectly clear. Chart is really self-explanatory, so with your words to accompany them, it's really clear. Yeah. Okay,
great. So then, maybe I'll share this with you. I'm sure your listeners are really intellectual and very interested in everything that's, how you produce it. There's two methods of producing LFP, cathode active material. This is what's called the solid state or precursors method. The precursors method really is the one that has been practiced to date in China. It involves taking purified phosphoric acid and lithium hydroxide or carbonate, and you combine the two and you create lithium phosphate. And then on the other side you've got purified phosphoric acid again and iron sulfate, and you create iron phosphate. And then the two come together, they're mixed together. A carbon source is added to coat it. It's milled and it's put into an electric furnace, and then you got your material. Okay, that's a traditional Chinese method, and this is kind of based on logistics, so it's easier to transport materials to an end source where they're manufactured, because when you create this process, this becomes crystallized, and you can transport it across China, which has great distances. But when we come to the Western world, what we prefer to use here is, and what most of the companies that have IP associated with developing lithium iron phosphate powder, they're all moving to this hydrothermal method, meaning this assumes that materials are in situ and they're in place, and they don't have to travel across long distances. And so you're taking lithium hydroxide, which would be in aqueous format, iron sulfate, which is an aqueous format as well, and purified phosphoric acid, which is an aqueous format as well. You're putting them inside of a reactor vessel. Out comes the water, out comes the sulfur. And then there's a wet milling process where it's the materials kind of centrifuged together. It's dried, it's mixed. They add a carbon source, and then they basically cook it in an electric furnace, and out comes the LFP cathode active material. This process here gives better control over certain things like what temperature to process it at. And it sort of kind of allows you to, I guess if you're thinking of it as, cooking, you can cook kind of, you have more flexibility in how you cook it, and that's where the IP will reside for a lot of these manufacturers using this method. Whereas when you go back to the precursors method, it's pretty standard. There's really not too much ability to control output and quality.
Can I ask a quick question? Is the second method also more cost effective? Because there's less steps in the process, or not necessarily so?
It's hard to say. There's many manufacturers working on this process right now. A lot of it is still R&D. I believe that this would be the process that would probably run for most of North America and Europe on the just-in-time systems, because the just-in-time systems will assume that these elements, materials, are basically are in situ and they're available, and that they do not need to excuse me for a second. So it will assume that these materials are local and they're sourceable and they're all in one spot, and generally just-in-time manufacturing wants all its source materials in one spot and very neatly organized. So I believe that, this is the method that's going to be preferred. I think these assumptions can be dangerous because I don't know of anybody who's got these three materials together in one spot in North America, but that's what First Phosphate is trying to do. Everybody's working on the theoreticals from the top down, but First Phosphate is working from the bottom up. We're trying to put together a process where these three elements would be available, at the port of Saguenay, Quebec, where we could, define an LFP battery valley for the production of this LFP battery material, in spite of whatever process is used. So we could use either process, the traditional process or an advanced process. But I do believe, to answer your question, that the automobile manufacturers will move to this process because they will assume just-in-time, or they will create conditions of just-in-time sourcing of raw materials for this process. And I believe that this process, gives better, should be able to give a better quality result. You see certain claims by some of the companies, investing in IP through this process, and they seem that they seem to claim that they can make a better product than the traditional method. And it would logically make sense that they could. Now, obviously, the devil's going to be the detail and the proof, and all that is ongoing.
Okay, makes sense. And is it First Phosphate's goal to be entirely vertically integrated in this process, so to be your own lithium and iron sulfate provider as well, or will you search for horizontal supplies?
Yeah, I will give you a little bit of an indication into our business model. That's a really great question. If you could just hold on a second, I need to find that slide. Okay, so you were asking about the First Phosphate business model and how we plan to integrate. So Stein, basically what you have here, what we've done is pictorially we've represented the whole value chain in the process of creating an electric vehicle, and even recycling the battery afterwards, but creating that electric vehicle using a lithium iron phosphate battery, and starting at the mine source. We don't consider the lithium here because there's lots of lithium producers, but we consider starting with phosphate, right? So here we start with phosphate extraction, then you have beneficiation, which is where you do the first purification, and then this is the advanced refinement to phosphoric acid. And then after this, you add in the iron sulfate and the lithium hydroxide, and you get the LFP cathode active material. And then from there, this CAM material will go into battery cells and battery packs. It will create the batteries. Then the batteries go into the EV, and then at the end of the life, the battery is recycled. So where do we see First Phosphate working? Well, we see First Phosphate working starting right from here. We truly do believe that in order to have a properly functioning just-in-time auto manufacturing industry in North America or Europe or anywhere else, you're going to need, the auto manufacturers are going to need full control over their supply chain, right? So we started that process for them. We said we're going to be able to take you from mine all the way to LFP cathode active material. And that's where First Phosphate is going to stop. And after that, we will pass on that LFP cathode active material to the producers of batteries. They'll produce the battery and it will go into the car. Right now, everything that you read out there and, the whole sort of demeanor and everything is right around here, right? It's around EV assembly and it's around battery production, gigawatt hours, right? Everyone's talking gigawatt hours all day long, and now they're talking terawatt hours, and it's all in here. But the biggest fundamental mistake that we're making worldwide is we're not considering this. Okay, where the hell do you get your raw materials from, right? We're starting to, right? They're starting to talk about, well, we can't find cobalt, we can't find ethically sourced cobalt, we can't find enough manganese, nickel's in short supply, copper's in short supply, but that's because everyone's figuring this solution, right? Everyone's top down. Everybody wants to, build the sexy thing, build the car, and focus on that. But at some point, when all these people get financed to do this, they're going to have to figure this out real quick, right? Where do we get the materials from? How secure is the supply chain? Can we handle the mining, the midstream, and this is the midstream as well. Is it secure? Does it come from China? Is it all within North America? Is it ESG driven? Is it consistent? Is it secure? Is it ethical? Right? So we're preparing all of that. Like I'm preparing this big block here as CEO of First Phosphate, so that when it comes time for the battery producers to do their magic, they know that they can count on us. Right? The big thing is, you have to understand, because of phosphate is still 90% in the fertilizer industry, you know, can a fertilizer company supply the needs of an automotive manufacturer, right? Somebody who's focused 95% of their day on making fertilizers, are they really going to be able to supply and take into consideration the needs of an auto manufacturer who's running just-in-time processes when it's only 5 to 10% of their business? And I think the answer everybody would say is no, right? So what we plan to do is we plan to be 100% focused on the end client, which is the EV manufacturer. We see that as a technology client. We want to be focused on the needs of the technology client, and we want to give them what they need. And we know what they need. They need full security in here. They need ESG. They need it in North America. They need it on a proper carbon footprint, and they need it secure, and they need it to run just in time. So we're putting together this big block for them right here. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense and really interesting. Great explanation, John. Thank you for that. So if I understand your answer correctly, you are mainly focusing on the phosphate part of the story, and you are looking for partners to get lithium and iron from, but you will focus on making the entire cathode active material yourself, correct?
Yeah, correct. That is the direction of the company right now. We have access to phosphate ore. We obviously have to put a mine into production. We're looking for a partner on the advanced refinement in terms of the creation of purified phosphoric acid. We're looking for a partner on the lithium side. As far as the iron sulfate side, we're quite lucky. We're experimenting with this right now. We have a recovery of titanium. A byproduct of refining titanium is actually iron sulfate. So that would be very helpful. If not, there are other sources of iron out there, but it's going to take some time to really figure out what the exact material strategy is. But that's something that we're working on every day. And lastly, we do need eventually we need a supplier of LFP cathode active material production technology. And why I'm so excited about this part here is that there's already 5 or 6 different producers of this that we know of in the Western world using the hydrothermal method. If not, we have access to the normal Chinese method as well. So it's great because we're not betting on a technology, right? Like what we want to bet on is we want to bet on bringing it together, this process, this supply chain process, the upstream and the midstream to the auto manufacturers, and take away the risk. We don't want to have the risk of inventing technology to make LFP. We'll just work with the best provider out there. Same thing with the phosphoric acid. We're just going to work with the best provider in the world. We don't want to have to go through all that process again. And this is another really important part here, Stein, because those who are refining lithium or graphite, they're kind of starting from scratch because there weren't processes available for doing that in the Western world. Whereas, the process for purifying phosphoric acid up to food grade and technology grade phosphoric acid, it's been out there for over 70 years in the Western world. So there's a process that, we can rely on. So it takes away that risk.
Wow, that with my limited knowledge, it really sounds like a smart business plan, like how you described it. One quick follow-up question before I ask you to describe the business as it currently stands. Can you perhaps explain to us what the prices of phosphate are when you go through this upstream, midstream, and downstream pipeline? So what are prices of phosphate when you get it out of the ground? What is it like when it's in a pure phosphoric acid form? And what is it like in active cathode form?
So that's another long answer. I'm glad we have a lot of time today. Okay, so basically, when you're at the mine source and you're taking phosphate ore out of the ground, in igneous deposit, which is the deposits that we have, and I'd like to talk to you about that a little bit as well, because that's really important. There's 2 types of phosphate.
I'll ask a couple of questions regarding that later on, if that's all right with you.
Sure. So,
okay, perfect.
Igneous phosphate, basically you take it out of the ground at somewhere between 5 and 10%. Whereas if it were sedimentary, it usually comes out at, 22 to 32%, but with lots of impurities. But with igneous phosphate, what's really nice is it doesn't have the same impurities that the sedimentary phosphate does. In the sedimentary phosphate is 95% of the world's phosphate. So with that, you can create a lot of pure phosphoric acid from the igneous rock, but igneous rock, it is found within I would say that the host rock that holds the phosphate is called apatite. At its theoretical purity, apatite is 42% P2O5, which is phosphate. In beneficiating that rock, already in our metallurgical tests, we have gotten close to 41% purity, so on a theoretical max of 42, and that's extremely high. When you look at sedimentary deposit, they get it maybe up to 30%. So this is to answer your question about price. The price of phosphate rock from Morocco currently is about $300 US per ton, and that's a rock that's at about 30% P2O5 content. Now, igneous rock, there's two types of igneous rock. There's carbonatite and there's anorthosite. There's only one country and two producers within that country, I believe, that export igneous rock. And it's not the igneous rock that we have. We have an anorthosite rock, which is even rarer within the igneous. It's the other form of igneous, which is carbonatite, which is already very pure. And can you guess what country that is?
I have no idea.
It's
no clue.
It's Russia.
Really?
So yes, in the Kola Peninsula of Russia, right near Finland, the area that's being mined actually used to be ex-Finland before the Second World War. There's what's called Kola rock. Kola rock is sold on the international market. It's, as far as I know, the only exporter of igneous rock, and that rock tends to be at about they beneficiate it up to about 38%. Maybe it gets to 39, close to 40%. So that rock commands a little bit higher price on the market because it's got higher percentage of P2O5. So that rock might trade at $380 per ton, maybe 400. So again, just to reiterate, phosphate rock from Morocco, which is the standard. Morocco is the biggest producer in the world. It's like the Saudi Arabia of phosphate rock production. At 30% P2O5 content. Currently, right now, it's around $300 US per ton, and the Kola rock out of Russia is probably about 380, 400, just because it's got 25% more P2O5 in it. So that's the first stage. That's rock. Okay. So now what happens to that rock? That rock then goes to a secondary plant, and the caveat I'll say here is in most cases, those who are mining phosphate, they're integrated. They're fully vertically integrated. So there's very little phosphate rock that trades on the open market. Maybe 10 to 15% of the total global supply trades on the open market. The other 85% is basically a company that owns the mine, who then has the next process just purifying it. So it's like they sell it to themselves. So generally, what happens with that is it moves from phosphate concentrate, at 30% for sedimentary and close to 40% for a igneous rock. It then moves to become MgA. MgA is merchant grade acid. It's like the first level of purification. It's like a quick purification process to take out the larger impurities, and really more than anything else is to separate the P2O5, the phosphate, from the rest of the apatite mineral, right? And that's usually done by attacking the rock with sulfuric acid. So in goes a sulfuric acid. Usually it's 1.2 to even 1.5 times the amount of actual phosphate rock is sulfuric acid. It goes in, and it basically separates it creates calcium sulfate. So some of the impurities, especially the calcium, will come out in calcium sulfate, and then you'll have MgA acid, merchant grade acid. Big consideration there is you're creating a lot of gypsum. And these gypsum slag piles are a big issue. They're not allowed anymore in Europe. In the U.S., they have to stay inert. They stay there for perpetuity. Problem is they're ending up in the sinkholes in Florida, North Carolina, a place like that. They're getting washed back into the Gulf of Mexico with the hurricanes and that. So that's an issue. But anyways, we'll talk about that later. But anyways, what you're doing is you created merchant grade acid at that point. So merchant grade acid is used for making fertilizer or for feeding animals because it doesn't have to have the purity levels. So that merchant grade acid, I believe, and again, it's very hard to put a pin on this because again, a lot of this acid is sold back internally. So the guy who the big fertilizer company that, basically takes the ore out of the ground, then sells it to themselves to make MGA, right? Then they sell the MGA to themselves to make fertilizer. So what does that mean is they take the MGA, they will add it with ammonia, they will add nitrogen to it, potash, all kinds of different ways of doing this. I wouldn't even want to get into it. And then they create basically a bag of fertilizer for the store, or they create that massive fertilizer that would be spread on crops and that, right? Anything from a little can that you'll buy for your flour to massive quantities of the stuff that will just go into big agricultural supplies, right? So that usually is, from my understanding, and again, I could be completely wrong. All this trades by offtake and it changes every day. It's somewhere between $1,000 to $1,200, $1,500 US dollars per ton of MGA. Okay. Now, that's usually where it stops. That's where it stops for 90% of the world. The next 10% is if you want to go up to purified phosphoric acid. And again, there's some fertilizer companies that then sell this MGA to themselves and they make PPA. But most of them just stop there. There's only 4 producers of PPA in the Western world. There's a number in China, but that's another story. They make PPA in another way that's very environmentally unfriendly. Will never be accepted here in the Western world. It was cut out of places such as even the Netherlands 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and it's never going to come back. That's a thermal method of making it, but the wet method of creating phosphoric acid is the one that's acceptable, and it's the only way forward for the world. So then you're purifying up the purified phosphoric acid. It takes a number of other transformations. I'm hearing prices on purified phosphoric acid in Europe and in the Western world that up to $2,000 to $3,000 USD per ton. But again, it's such a small market and it's so vertically integrated. And even there, most people who create the purified phosphoric acid, it then gets turned into what are called phosphate salts. Phosphate salts is just a crystallized form of purified phosphoric acid that is then used, for food preservatives, whatever else it might be. There's also, purified phosphoric acid market sales that are just sold on the open market, but it's very hard. That goes through very small hands, very small distributors, so it's hard to know the price. The price of purified phosphoric acid apparently is much lower in China right now, and the reason for that is because of the methods that they use to produce it, right? There's a lot of environmental decay that goes on in that. So that's kind of what your phosphate world kind of looks like. Now within, PPA, purified phosphoric acid, which is the highest purity form, there's all kinds of different types of uses. So your supplier might ask you for a certain type of usage. If you're going into the LFP battery, for instance, what your supplier is going to ask you for is, I want battery grade. I want battery grade PPA. So what does that mean? Battery grade PPA just basically means purified phosphoric acid at the food grade level, but you have to further purify to whatever they want out. They might want all the sulfur out. They might want out all the metals out. And again, at that point, there's very little of these elements remaining. But as you can appreciate in a battery, it's so sensitive that any form of conductivity in there, could create a short, could create a malfunction, and then the whole battery would basically be dead. So it's very important that they have these high levels of purity. And again, mentioning this just-in-time manufacturing process, what's really important, the manufacturers, automobile manufacturers, they just want ultimate purity right throughout their whole supply chain, and sometimes they just go to fanatical levels of purity on all their materials, just because they don't want any one thing to affect any other thing within the supply chain, right? So it's fanatical level of purity, PPA for battery grade applications, and it's determined by your supplier.
Yeah, that was a really in-depth explanation to what the phosphate world really looks like behind the scenes. And it really sounds familiar to how graphite, which is a material this YouTube channel focuses on a lot, is currently being traded. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes trading and vertical integration, which makes pricing so extremely hard. But it is also not too dissimilar to how lithium was a couple of years ago, before it was institutionalized, after which the price of lithium has increased massively. as you're probably familiar with. Do you think something like that will also happen to phosphate in the near future?
Yeah, so there's actually a very good article on our website. If you go to our website and you go to www.firstphosphate.com, and you click on LFP-Battery, and then I think there's a link that says LFP-Battery Strategy. You'll see a link that was written by our advisor together with Battery Metals Review. Our advisor is Yves Caprara. He was CEO of one of the largest producer of purified phosphoric acid in the world. That's Preon Technologies out of Belgium, and he's put together a really good fact piece on where the pinch point's going to be in the LFP battery. And the pinch point is going to be, like we were discussing, obviously, is purified phosphoric acid. So, if the LFP battery becomes, say, I don't know, 5% of the phosphate world, well, what effect is that going to have on phosphate rock? Well, there's going to be an increase in demand of phosphate rock for 5%, correct? But what is that increase within the purified phosphoric acid component, right? So that could be an increase of, we're predicting very conservatively, and just for EVs, and just inside of North America, 35%. Now, you start adding to that, smaller applications like scooters, all kinds of other little...
Sorry, real quickly, is the 35% figure a total increase, or is it like a compounded figure? What does the 35% figure mean?
So, yeah, okay, good question. So, based on 2030 numbers, just for EVs alone, the demand for purified phosphoric acid in North America will increase by 35%. Okay,
total compared to now.
Total
Okay.
compared to now. But again, if you look at what EVs are to lithium iron phosphate battery in general, which nobody has those statistics, they're a very small component. They might only be 25%. What happens with large-scale energy storage? What happens with small appliances, scooters, and the rest of it? What about buses and tractors and long-haul transportation, and maybe even trains, planes, submarines, all kinds of military applications? There's no numbers for that. And in those larger scale applications, it's really only the lithium iron phosphate battery that can work, because there just isn't enough metals in the world for those applications. So, you could be looking at, and again, this is just off the top of my head, and it's not in anybody's numbers, but 100, 200, 300, 500% more requirement of purified phosphoric acid. But the big problem, the big problem is how do you create that? It's a large capex to do it. And this is the discussion around sedimentary deposits. Sedimentary deposits, and again, there's debate around this, and people will hang me out for it. But my opinion, just my opinion, only between 10 and 20% of feedstock of beneficiated sedimentary rock can be converted up to purified phosphoric acid from sedimentary deposit, and then after that it becomes economically challenging to do it. There's a lot of impurities to deal with, and the rest of it's got to go into the fertilizer. But when you're dealing with igneous rock like First Phosphate has, we can purify, we believe, up to 88% of our feedstock to purified phosphoric acid. So we can make a huge difference. So with a mine size that's only 10% the size of a sedimentary mine, of which there are no more sedimentary mines in North America. Those that are in production have a 10, maximum 20-year lifetime left. And on top of it, all the residents in the area do not want to see them expanded. They fight all the time because, like I said, they have high radioactivity. They create these big gypsum slag piles to the surface that remain inert and are full of radioactivity. It affects the groundwater. So there is really no ability in North America to create more purified phosphoric acid. And the question is, well, okay, and this is the same problem in Europe. Europe's got it a little bit easier. They've got Morocco really close to there that can produce it. But for North America, how on earth do we import it? Importing purified phosphoric acid is difficult. It's done, but it contaminates. It's very expensive, and it requires a lot of special handling. And to do it in those kind of quantities required would be a massive logistical operation. And as you know, there's also a carbon footprint considerations of all these ships moving around the planet. So in the Inflation Reduction Act inside of North America says that we have to have local supply of minerals. So everything points to I believe to First Phosphate, to the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean region of Quebec, as the LFP battery valley to be established for North America, where we could have, phosphate mining, phosphate beneficiation, phosphate conversion to purified phosphoric acid, 88% of what we pull out of the ground, and also, production of LFP cathode material, everything in situ, because we also have lithium in Quebec, so it's not a problem to source lithium. Iron sulfate, we have iron at our deposit, so it could be very beneficial to do this, and to do this in large quantities that would really allow the LFP battery to take off. And if that happened, the LFP battery you would see it torque and to take much more market share than it currently has. But so that, again, to answer your question there, the real pinch point is going to be the purified phosphoric acid. And to some degree is sulfuric acid is also an issue, because you have to treat the phosphate rock with sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid is very difficult to source nowadays, especially on the ESG scale. We have lots of that in Ontario and Quebec in Canada. And the last thing is, to produce LFP cathode active material, you need power, and we have green power from the hydro dams in Quebec, so we're extremely well positioned there in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, Quebec, to become the LFP battery valley of North America, and that's what we're going to be doing here at Phosphate, at First Phosphate.
Perfect. Those are some really interesting tailwinds to have as a company, for sure. Really interesting. Now, perhaps we've talked a lot about where First Phosphate hope to grow towards in the future. Perhaps you can share a bit about where Phosphate currently stands. So what does the company currently have going for itself? And what are some of the short to medium term plans the company has?
Yeah, okay, Stein. So that's a good question. The basis we really believe for the vertical integration is the mine. It's a proper mine. If you look at the companies in the fertilizer world, you look at companies like Mosaic, you look at companies like Nutrien, they all start with secure control over their mine. Once you have the mine in place, then you can slowly build your product up downstream. So we know, the most important thing for us is to have phosphate. So now we have 1,500 square kilometers of claims in phosphate-bearing rock in the region of Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, Quebec. They're all within about 250 kilometers of the deep sea port of Saguenay. We had a very special operation when we set up the company to go out and secure all of these claims. We bought out all the claims that were existing. We bought out all the claims that from other prospectors. We did our own magnetic surveying, and we basically bought up the whole area. So we secured the whole area. Now, on our flagship property, La Colorignal, we've done what's called a 43-101 report that establishes a resource. We've come up with 49 million tons in the ground of phosphate-bearing rock at 5.2%. It's got 4.2% titanium, and it's got about 23% iron. So that's our major flagship area. We're now moving very shortly that property into PEA, preliminary economic assessment, which sort of defines the logistics around the deposit, the feasibility, and the economics. And also, we have all our other claims. We consider them blue sky claims. They're all known phosphate areas. There's at least 3, 4, 5% up to 10% phosphate on all these claims. But we're extremely excited about what we're finding at a property called Bégin-La-Marche. And in a second, I'll share my screen and I'll show that to you. Bégin-La-Marche is giving indications of, again, only surface samples, and we're to begin drilling there shortly. But what you find on surface, you usually look for that continues down, because these are open pit mines. So a 10% phosphate, that's extremely interesting. And these properties are also very close to the deep sea port. They're 80 kilometers from the deep sea port, and they have great logistics associated with them, great support from the local municipalities and indigenous groups. So we are very interested to be able to look further at Bégin-La-Marche as our real focus of the blue sky properties. And then we have a number of other blue sky properties as well that we can look to in the future. But you start getting into a lot of phosphate at that point. I'm just going to share my screen again here. I'm really excited about this, so I want to show you where our land holdings are. Give me a second. Okay, so if we look here, Stein. So basically, down here at the bottom is the deep sea port of Saguenay, Port Saguenay. And then, if you do a 60-kilometer tour here, you get, this is all provincial road, it's paved highway. you get to basically what are main logging roads. They're fully 365 days a year. They're graveled. They're maintained by the logging industry. You go up another 80 kilometers and you get to Lac L'Orignal. This is our flagship area. This is where we have the 43101 established. But what we've also done at the same time is we've locked up all these other lands in this area here. Okay, so this is Fleury, Yves, Catherine, Gouin, So, and then two other little instances right here: Antoine, Perron, Alex, Brochet, Willie, and Béjean-la-Marche. Béjean-la-Marche is where we've found these exceptional surface samples that we're really we're focused on. Basically, we're going to be doing an extended drilling campaign right in this area here this spring, just to see if what we found on surface confirms into what depth. So these are our, this is really our blue sky property that we're focusing on here is Béjean-la-Marche. The other ones we're finding very high grades is sort of, in this area here, these ones here. But this one obviously is so close to infrastructure, to the port of Saguenay. And it's also got 1, 2, 3 accesses to get to the port, that we're really interested in focusing the blue sky exploration here. But the PEA work will be done here at Lac L'Orignal.
Okay, perfect. And could you perhaps also explain the importance of an NI 43101 technical report and that PEA, PFS, FS, those kind of filings? Because a lot of investors which stumble upon battery materials might not be familiar with how the mining world works. So could you perhaps shortly explain what these two types of filings are and what their importance is?
So the 43101 report, it's important because it establishes a resource. Like, you can have surface samples and you can have drilling, and drilling can show results, but until that is processed by, a qualified person, in geologists and such, you really don't have a footing to say that you have a resource. But once that report is done, you've established a resource, the number of tons in the ground. So that was important for us. But not only this is our mineral resource estimate here, 15.8 million tons of indicated resource, and then 33.2 million tons of inferred resource. But what's more important too is we also did metallurgical test work. So we in our metallurgical test work at that point, we were able to concentrate our beneficiate our rock up to 38%, right? From the 5.2% that comes out of the ground, we were able to get to 38%. And we're continuing that kind of work, and we expect our larger metallurgical study to be out here in a couple of months that will confirm even better apatite concentrate grade. So that was important.
John, real quickly, that 38% is compared to the 42%, I believe, maximum, which is theoretically achievable, right?
Yes, the theoretical achievable is 42%. Generally you could get to somewhere between 38 to 40%. I believe we can get up to close to 40 to 41%.
Okay, thank you.
So that I think that basically answers your question on the 43101. This is kind of how our deposit, our resource looks in 3D, and so. Yeah, the next steps are now to do the preliminary economic assessment and determine the feasibility around the project, the economics, and the logistics. It's nice. It's sitting on surface. It's sitting in a nice position. There's not a lot of waste rock associated to it. So, those are all really good benefits.
Do you perhaps have a timeline available for that PEA? Is there a timeline that you can share?
Yeah, so we're indicating to the market that should be ready by Q3 to Q4 of this year.
Okay, that's reasonably quickly. And there's actually a question one of my viewers sent in. When do you actually expect to hopefully start selling phosphate at some point? What time frame are we looking at for that milestone?
Yeah, so the ability to sell phosphate is obviously determined by the ability to bring a mine into production. Obviously, we're doing everything that we can to make it happen as soon as possible. As you know, in the Western world, there's a process. We have very high environmental standards, so there's a lot of studies that need to be done. Generally, I would think that it's a 3 to 5 year process.
Okay, so we're looking at 3 to 5 years from here on out till the first revenues might flow into first phosphate, assuming no big delays happen in between, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's on the mining side. On the LFP cathode active material side, there's a potential that we might be able to start on that earlier, and that would be, once we are able to solidify partnership agreements, we might have partners that might be able to provide, the input materials ahead of our mine being produced, in order just to start production and to get that whole side of things going. So, there might be potential to get out a little bit earlier with the cathode active material, but I want to caution, we still have a lot of work to do on our end to, get all our ducks in a row.
Makes sense. Okay. And what do you believe are the biggest risks between now and hopefully the end goal of selling that active cathode material? What are the biggest risks that you are personally looking out for?
Well, obviously always capitalized in capital markets and the ability to capitalize and communicate properly with the markets and have investors support you. That's obviously a major risk. We're trying to do our best to communicate with investors and be upfront and open and do as much outreach as we can. The other risks some people have brought up is a change in technology, right? People bring up solid state batteries or lithium ion sodium ion batteries and all that, but I want to point out on that one, just the homologation process of any of these batteries is 3 to 5 years, right? So any of those kind of bad technologies that could come out, they'll be in the future. Solid state batteries will still need the same materials, might be less, they might last longer, but they're still going to need all kinds of battery materials. And other technologies like sodium ion and other things coming to the market, I mean, they're just going to take a lot of time. And in a lot of ways, phosphate is kind of a sodium ion battery, if you will. It's if you consider phosphate a salt or a cheaper alternative to the other chemistries, you've already got a really good price with phosphate. In any of those sodium batteries, they will require purification just like phosphate. And I think the price points might not be any different. So I'm really comfortable being in phosphate because lithium iron phosphate is the cheapest chemistry that we know. It's going to be the cheapest chemistry for a long time, so that's a good barrier to entry. And then also, if something did change, there's always the fertilizer markets, right? They're going to be hot forever. If I showed you here the curve of the amount of phosphate that's going to be used just for agriculture in the next in the coming century, it's just incredible. I want to just share this with you because it is so spectacular. This is the curve of phosphate, right, from the 1960s. This is where we're at now, and this is where we're projecting that we go for 2100. So phosphate and food phosphates are going to be a major component and a major demand driver. And I don't think if something happened to a big change in chemistry in the batteries, the lithium guys would have a really hard time. The graphite guys would have a really hard time selling that many hockey sticks. But anybody in phosphate would be okay, I think. There might be some price pressure, but I think we got a really good fallback in phosphate, and that's why what really got me interested in phosphate was the fact that we, as LFP-Battery, we occupy such a small part of the market, which might be 5 to 10% by 2030, 2040, 5 to 10% of phosphate globally. So we're always going to be a niche market. It's a niche market that you can really focus on. The fertilizer guys can't get to it. It's a high technology market. So I just see moat all around this thing, and then I see the safety blanket of fertilizer if something goes wrong.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for those insights, and thanks for bringing them in a way that an investor might think as well, because a value investor always thinks in moats and competitive advantages, so it's great to hear that you're thinking that way as well. Now, actually, I have a follow-up question regarding the first part of your answer, which was about communications toward investors, and this comes from one of my viewers as well. The question is, how do you plan to keep investors updated on the progress of the projects over time?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, I come from a family office background. I've been an investor for a number of years, and I generally did not necessarily see myself as a CEO of a company. If you had asked me eight months ago if I was going to be the CEO of this company or a phosphate company, I would have told you you're absolutely insane. But here I am, and the reason I'm here is for one specific reason: is that I have had a lot of misgivings with certain management teams around certain investments that I've had in the past, and I thought it was really important that if I was going to be a main investor in this company, which I am, I'm the lead investor, I should also be the one who drives the company, because I see such potential for it, but I see the need to do it right. Not that I see myself as better than anybody else, but I just see my heart being in the right place. And there's challenges, there's things I don't know, but we always work to find answers. So I'm on the side of the investor in the sense that I'm here for the long run. I'm here to build this company. I'm invested in this company. I've decided to make this the project for the next foreseeable future of my life. And so we are communicating in the way that I would have wanted to be communicated with if I were just an investor. If you go here to our newsletter page, our news page, for instance, I'm just going to I want to show you kind of what our news cycle looks like for a company that's still private, which should be public here within the next 1 week, 1 or 2 weeks. Okay, so if you come onto our web page here and you go into our news area, for a company that's been private for the last 6 months, you'll see we've been communicating how many news releases do we have up there? 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 17. Like that's almost a news release every week, every 2 weeks. We plan to keep the market updated. Our site is fully bilingual. We're also in German to cater for the European audience. And so you'll see that we're just communicate. And it's all meaningful news in my opinion, right? We don't want to communicate for the sake of communicating, but we're putting out meaningful news, meaningful results, material information, and we continue to do that. And also, I plan to be in front of a lot of investor audiences such as yours all the time. I plan to be open for investor questions. I don't think that there's any question that doesn't make sense, that shouldn't be answered. I think that all investor queries are important. They need to be answered. They need to be answered respectfully, and we only get better by the questions that we're asked. And I beseech people to ask us the tough questions. Ask us the questions that you feel are tough. And if you think that we're not answering a question, make sure that we're aware that we're not answering it. We should answer it. Now, I don't have the answers to everything in life. Even in my business, I can only control 70-80% of elements. There's things I don't know, but if I don't have an answer, I will get it for you. It might take a week sometimes. It might take a few days. It could take longer. But I'd like to come, I'll take my time and I'll come back to you with the proper answers. Sometimes there are no good answers, or sometimes the answer gets answered with more questions. But that's the process, and that's what makes us inquisitive, and that's what makes investing, and that's what makes good corporations is transparency and the ability unarrogantly to answer questions and to stand up to investors in terms of their needs and requirements. Yeah.
I think I entirely agree with your view on communication with shareholders. I also really find that skin in the game part attractive, where management also has a stake in the company. That's often something I look for in my investments. So really interesting to hear your point of view on that as well. Now, to my disappointment, and perhaps to the disappointment of some viewers as well, like you described before, First Phosphate isn't a public company yet. But you have also hinted at going public reasonably soon. Perhaps you can talk about that. Explain what your plans are for going public on the short to medium term.
Yeah. So first, I just want to touch on your skin in the game question. I just want to let you know that this entire company, everybody who works at the company, around the company, is somehow involved in the company. Those that are able to be invested in the company, because some aren't, they have to maintain neutrality. But those who can be invested, everybody has wanted to be invested, and everybody is invested. Everybody has got skin in the game, cash in the game, multiple time hours in the game. We've got a great team. Everybody works really well together. I just love it. Our board, our management, everybody's well invested. All of our shareholders, I know every single shareholder personally. I wouldn't say it's 99%. I would say it's 100% of shareholders I have spoken to, or I know who they are, or unless it's somebody's son or daughter that I haven't talked to, but I will know their dad or whoever brought them into it. So we know everybody in the company. We want to keep it that way. All our shares are well escrowed in all the rounds of financing. And that's going to lead to properly trading company, and because of that, only investors who saw the long term came into this. So this I would hope that this stock is going to reflect that when it starts trading, the long term nature of what we're building here. Next, Your next question was, when are we going to be publicly trading? So we are in literally the final stages. We're right at the goal line of being publicly traded. We will be traded under the symbol PHOS, PHOS. That's Peter, Harry, Oscar, Sam. That's on the Canadian Securities Exchange. I believe that should happen within the next 1 to 2 weeks. We were hoping to be trading early in January, but these bureaucratic processes do take some time. But everything's in order, everything's lined up, and we're really excited to get out there on the capital markets and to do good by investors.
Wow, that's really interesting. And are we looking at an IPO, a DPO? What kind of public listing are we looking for?
Yeah, so we're actually very fortunate in that matter as well. First Phosphate was a company that had been cease trade ordered in 2012. It was cease trade ordered as First Potash, believe it or not. Our CFO and myself, we brought up the company back to life, and we were looking to, we were looking for assets to acquire with it. But then what we ended up doing is, we looked at about 100 deals. We didn't like any of them. We bought these assets, these phosphate assets, directly into First Potash. We renamed it First Phosphate, and we decided to run the company ourselves. So this means there isn't, this RTO extra stock in the way. There isn't even an IPO process because it already is a reporting issuer. So the ability to get public is just a direct listing of an old company that ceased to be listed and now will be relisted. And those involved are just the board and the management and all of our shareholders. So it's a very smooth process, a very clean process, and it's a process that with a very, very tight shareholder base.
That is really interesting, and I'm for sure going to keep my eyes on the First Phosphate listing following soon. Now, that was one of the last questions I wanted to ask you regarding Phosphate as a company, First Phosphate as a company, sorry. And now I'd like to focus in on your background, John, because like I said during the intro, I believe that to be quite interesting as well. Is there anything you would like to add regarding First Phosphate before we dive into your background?
Well, I mean, First Phosphate is I think I can kind of company. We're a company of the people. We start with the people of Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean. I feel like that's my new passport. I feel inherently a part of the people out there. I feel that they're on board with us, and we remain very close, very, very local. I speak fluent French. I speak French internationally. I speak French, with a little bit of a Quebecois cadence as well. So we're very integrated into the area. All of our staff is bilingual. Our company is fully bilingual, English and French. We have a great rapport with Quebec, the Quebec government, indigenous groups, all the local groups. We're all about community. We're all about working together. And that extends to our shareholder base, right? Our shareholder base is our family. It's our extended family. Everybody in the company is somebody that, I get along with really, really well. And everybody gets along really well amongst themselves, and we form an excellent, excellent team. And the dotted lines that we create are exceptional between us, and I encourage that. I encourage teamwork. I encourage cross-functional work, and I encourage connecting the dots, even when you don't think that they might be there, and we get to some really exceptional results. So yeah, that's kind of. I hope I answered your question there.
Yeah, perfectly. Excellent, fine words. Now, if it's all right with you, I would like to focus on your background. Because if your LinkedIn profile is to be trusted, you do not actually have a background in geology or technology for that matter. You've done an MBA, which is a Master of Business Administration. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So could you perhaps roughly sketch out for us how you've gone from business administration to now being the CEO of a junior mining company?
Yeah, so I think in life your career takes you where it needs to take you, and you should see yourself as floating on a raft just down a river. You don't want to end up in rapids. You want to stay in the right lanes. You want to make the right choices. But that's the way I've always looked at my life. My life has been more art than it has been science. I went to university and I studied languages in university. I traveled extensively across Europe. I then, didn't end up with much of a degree that I could do much with, right? Languages, I could pick up phones at a train station maybe, but I got a little bit tired of that. So I did do an MBA. I did an MBA international business with focus on European business, and we're going to see that come through very, very shortly here in with First Phosphate and some of the partnerships that we're developing. And then after that, I got into stock trading. I've been a stock trader for a number of years. I developed some very specific algorithms for stock trading at one point. I ran some very specific medium frequency trading apparatus. Before that, I was an internet entrepreneur. I was ranked very high in the early days of the internet. I was in the business-to-business marketing sector for trade shows. That was really excellent. That gave me my whole technology background. I applied that to stock trading. And now I'm applying that whole background from what I've learned from the internet years, what I've learned from the stock markets to being a CEO of a public company. Before that, I also had my family office, and I learned about investing. So now I'm bringing all those things together. So I'm bringing technology. I know what technology people need. I've been on the internet in the beginning. It's got to go fast. It's got to go right. It's got to go right. So that's what we're going to bring to the battery suppliers, right? In terms of investors, I've been on both sides of it. I know what investors need. I know what I want as an investor, and I'm just trying to treat other investors like I would treat myself. I know those are big words that I say, and I've set myself up to a very high standard, but I'm going to try my best. We've been around capital markets for a long time too, so we understand what is necessary, the communications and how you have to handle them. Again, these are really big responsibilities. They're very, very big challenges. I'm going to be doing my best. I've got a great team around me. I'm very proud of my team. I'd be nothing without my team. I kind of am just the voice, the reflection of my team. And so, we're gonna try to do something really, really great here, with our limited resources. At some point, we're quite perceptive of the fact that there is no other solution in North America for the lithium iron phosphate battery than what we're looking to build here, and that's LFP Battery Valley, Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean. We believe we hold the key. We believe that the competitive advantage is there. We believe that we've built the moat, and we're building it. And we know that it's coming, and we see those signs more and more accurate every day. We see those signs in terms of who's starting to follow us on LinkedIn, who's starting to follow us on Twitter, who's starting to comment about us, the questions we're getting, the audiences that we're getting. It's really coming together.
Excellent. I really love how you described that your different experiences in totally different fields stack up to your toolkit, I should say, in your role as a CEO now today. That's really interesting to hear. Now, with 2020 hindsight, would you have done anything differently in your career path thus far? Would you have taken different steps with the end goal of getting here? Is there anything, you would have changed?
I think as individuals, we have to be fundamentally happy with the choices we made. We have to be happy with our lives. In your life, you have to be bold. You have to make the decisions, right? Even sometimes you're on your own. People are telling you it's wrong, but you feel it's right. People are trying to hold you back. Whatever it is, nothing's ever perfect, right? There's bullies everywhere. There's glass ceilings everywhere. There's resource challenges everywhere. But at a certain point, one thing I've learned in my career is, and I learned this a little bit too late in my career. I wish I'd learned it earlier, but I think you do need a career in order to learn it. Is you got to believe in yourself. You got to do the best that you can do. You got to be honest with yourself and with others, and you got to make it happen, right? And so the only way to do that is just to take your courage in your hands sometimes and to make it happen. And don't let people stop you. There's going to, listen to people. You have to listen to people and don't be stubborn. That's another very important thing in business, which I've also learned late in my life. So I do listen to all the people around me, but at the same time, make sure you're listening to the right voices, and make sure that those voices are there to help you and not to hold you back. We all have a lot of really we're all very creative, very unique, and very special, and we have exceptional talents. But some of us never are able to deploy those talents because of lack of belief in ourselves. So you don't need overconfidence and arrogance, but you do need belief in yourself. And sometimes that can come across as arrogance, but so be it, because there's a lot of people out there who will try to put you down. But you just got to go, and you got to go forward. So, as to your question, would I have done anything differently? No, I wouldn't have. I have always taken the bold decisions in my life. And think about this, leaving my family office, leaving everything that I was doing to become CEO of this company. That's a big, bold decision. And there's a poem once. I don't know if you ever read the poem, I can't remember who the author is anymore, but it's called The Road Less Traveled By. And there's a line that says in it, I took the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And that's something that I've sort of practiced very early in my career, and I thank God that I have, that I've, I had the ability. My parents gave me the strength in myself, the self-confidence to do that. And I've always taken the road a little bit different, and that has always made the difference. And I think this road that we're taking here with First Phosphate is the one that's going to make all the difference. I do see, another massive industry being developed in the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean. Right now it's just aluminum country. It's owned by Rio Tinto. It used to be the old Alcan. It's there. It's good. It's been there for decades. It's boring. It's doing well. But I do see the ability for another massive industry of the future there to develop. And I plan to do everything that I can to make that happen. I might not get there. I might get a quarter of the way there, a half of the way there. I certainly need some help. I can meet resistance. You never know what's going to happen. But I'm certainly that's what we're gearing for here, and that's what our whole management and board and everybody around us is behind, because it is the logical step. There's a clear competitive advantage and a moat to doing that.
Yeah, that sounds like a really great concept to live your life by, to walk the path that's less traveled, because it will make all the difference in the end. And what you were just describing really sounds like the last question I wanted to ask you. Which is, what would be your number one piece of advice for anyone watching this video? And you could aim it at someone perhaps younger, which doesn't really know what they want to do in life just yet. Or perhaps you could aim it at people that are already working towards their life goal. But yeah, just your number one piece of advice for anyone watching this video.
Yeah, so look, don't be arrogant. Start with, the proper bases, do your research, do what you want to do in life. Don't let anybody put you down. Believe in yourself. Surround yourself with good people. It's not easy. It takes time. Sometimes it takes a few failures to get there, but go for it. If you're in the investment world, and you're looking to make investments in companies such as ours, ask the tough questions. Be courteous. Don't be rude towards CEOs or other people. Always be courteous, but ask your questions, right? And make sure that your questions are answered. If your questions aren't answered, answer them again. And if they're not answered, then don't invest.
John, I tremendously appreciate you taking the time to answer all of my questions and for this opportunity to be able to pick your brain on those really complex topics. So yeah, really thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Stein. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to being back on your show at some point.
Awesome. Now, before we sign off, I do want to give you the opportunity to plug yourself and your company. So where can the viewers follow First Phosphate, and where can the followers follow you, John?
So, I do, anybody who contacts me on LinkedIn, I do usually accept. Sometimes they spam me afterwards trying to sell me stuff. That's fine. I just might not answer to the messages, but I will accept everybody's invitation. So you can follow me on LinkedIn. You can follow First Phosphate on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Twitter, I'm not active at all. Our company is active on Twitter. You could go to our website, www.firstphosphate.com, and you can also follow our stock, which will be traded on the Canadian Securities Exchange as PHOS, Peter, Harry, Oscar, Sam, PHOS. We're also going to be having a Frankfurt listing very shortly after we go public in Canada, or after we relist in Canada. And we also expect to be publicly traded on the OTC markets in the US.
Perfect. I'll make sure to drop those links down below in the description. Now, again, thank you so much, John, for taking the time and answering these questions.
Thank you, Stein. Take care and have a good day.